Today on the PIO podcast, I'm pleased to welcome Susan Simons. She's the president and founder of Under the Shield, a 501c3. Susan, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here.
So, Susan, before we get into the meat and potatoes of what we're going to talk about, I want to hear a little bit about your background. So, can you give us a brief synopsis of your background?
Sure, absolutely. As you can tell from my accent, I'm obviously not from Arizona. I was born and raised in South Carolina, have an undergraduate degree in criminal justice from the University of South Carolina, and have a master's degree in counseling and human development. But actually, more importantly, I'm board certified as an expert in traumatic stress and am a fellow of the American Academies of Experts in Traumatic Stress.
Excellent. Excellent. So, what this is going to fall right into what we're going to talk about today and about stress and involving the officers. So you've been working with law enforcement in the military community since, if I remember correctly, 1992 through Under the Shield. What prompted you to start the organization, and how has the mission of it evolved over time?
Wow, that's a loaded question and a lot of years to cover. And let me say this, my education really and truly did not mean a whole lot to me in what I wound up ultimately doing with Under the Shield.
Never does. It never does.
It's some expensive paper hanging on my wall. And that's about it. No, I was married to my high school sweetheart, and he was always going in law enforcement. Wound up being a deputy the first year of our marriage while I laugh and say we were going through the background investigation with the Drug Enforcement Administration. And we is actually very appropriate. I don't know about nowadays, but back then they used to run everybody related close to a neighbor, anybody who knew the person. So in 1984, we got dropped in New Orleans, which was a difficult time for DEA, if anybody knows the story of Kiki Camarena. And I was a litigation paralegal. I knew God had bigger and better things for me to do than work with lawyers my whole life, but that's how I started out. And then we had an agent killed in Birmingham, Alabama, May 20, 1992. It wound up being the catalyst for what launched Under the Shield. I left the litigation paralegal world and realized that families of law enforcement specifically were lacking in training, lacking in resources, or at least knowing how to find the resources. And it has evolved into all first responders, families, military and families. And then the company moved to headquarters to Phoenix, Arizona, or Mesa, Arizona in the summer of 2012.
Okay. Excellent. So we had an officer involved death. We had an officer responding to a call, ended up getting involved in a rollover car crash, avoiding a person running across the street in the middle of traffic. And I'll tell you, one of the things that we learned pretty quickly was that there were so many resources out there, but we didn't know how to connect them all. And I know that there are organizations that are out there now, like the concerns for police survivors. They're out there, and they were actually a big help because they came to us, which was huge. We had the officer's family. She was just had a baby, so the things that had to be set up and done for them. And we have a thing here in Illinois called the 100 Club.
Yes.
Which is another great resource. But if you don't know about it, you don't connect with it. And a lot of agencies had not put policies in place to deal with line of duty deaths the right way.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you'll talk about that. But I want to ask this question about the psychology garbage can.
Yes.
That theory is being adopted statewide in Arizona. How did that come about?
Well, I actually wrote that theory when I first started Under the Shield, having lived the lifestyle. I saw all the issues that were happening, and again, at home and with other agents, and the spouses had no idea what we could do about it that wouldn't endanger their jobs, their careers, their reputations. And so basically the theory explains post-traumatic stress as an injury rather than a disorder. And this is why it is so important to educate families up front, early on, because we are the first line of defense, because we do notice the early warning signs. And here's how the explanation for the psychological garbage can, and it is a published theory, but because Law enforcement, first responders, military is a lifestyle, meaning personal and professional connects. The sad part to me is for many, many generations and continuing on, we still are teaching in academies keep personal and professional separate. It's an admirable concept, but and honorable, but it is actually causing a lot of the divorces and a lot of the issues because my husband at the time may not have brought the details home, but he brought the mood home. This creates issues at home. So the garbage can theory goes like this. When you have one psychological garbage can, because what you do is a lifestyle, if you compare that garbage can to the garbage at home, the first thing you notice about the garbage at home, if you don't empty it, is it smells bad. The psychological garbage can, your attitude sucks, you're irritable, you're cynical, you're snapping at your families. I see you grinning and nodding your head. Families and friends say things like, this job has changed you. You're not as much fun as you used to be. We call that post traumatic stress. Garbage cans full. Then you go to empty your garbage at home and it's been sitting there for so long, the bag has decayed, you pick it up, the bottom falls out, and you have a huge mess. The psychological garbage can, we start noticing sleep deprivation, anxiety, depression, heartburn turns to acid reflux, high blood pressure, cancer, diabetes, and or asthma, sometimes all three and no family history. And then addictions, you can be suicidal in that phase, whatever. And we call that post-traumatic stress injury. And we tell our clients, you can stay in that injured phase till you get divorced 3 times or more, where or you get a DUI, or you just get fed up and quit, or you get fired, or you retire, or you can do what we call post-traumatic stress growth, where you grow through your injury by helping others. All of our stress coaches have been on the couch. And in order to be a stress coach with us, you have to have done it, been married to it, raised by it, or given birth to it. Sometimes we have 2 or 3 of those that are met. But the garbage can theory seems to really resonate with a lot of people. I have guys that I trained 30 years ago in the academy. This is really dating me now in my age, who are now chiefs and sheriffs. And they tell me that that is something that stuck with them, and they share that with all their new recruits.
And, I'll tell you something. As somebody 27 years in law enforcement, I worked for 2 law enforcement agencies before I retired. Then I went to work as a civilian for 2 more.
Uh-huh.
And I'll tell you that you don't realize how much you carry with you and how it can affect you. And I saw in my experience midway through my career, everybody was hanging out together, everybody was doing just fine. And then we had an officer commit suicide. And that suicide, I saw that that was the beginning of the fracture for the department at the time, because all of a sudden people were questioning, did we even know who that person was? How did his closest friends not realize what was happening? And adding into that, like 5 years later, we had another officer involved suicide.
Yes.
And I was the shift supervisor that responded that day. So it was, it was even, it got compounded. And of course, you talked about all the things that come in there, the sleep deprivation, overeating, drinking, you know, the things coming home and getting in an argument with your spouse because they don't understand. And then, of course, it's not even just the suicides, it's what you see on a day to day basis, right? It's those tragic car accidents, the little kids that are abused, all those
Yes.
factors weigh in on you. And if you don't get help for that over time,
Yes.
and for years, law enforcement never did that, right?
Well, it hasn't seemed to be something that they felt was safe to get help. And, one of the things we emphasize it under the show, you talked about cops, and we also have the 100 Club of Arizona here. And those organizations are outstanding, especially in line of duty deaths. Our whole mission at Under the Shield, nothing breaks my heart more than to have a first responder sit on my couch and look at me and go, why do I have to die before people, society, my department are willing to do something for me and my family? And that's heartbreaking for me. So that's really what our whole goal is. we're big on the preventative side of things rather than the intervention or reactive side of things. Because suicide in this industry has absolutely, I'm never going to say never, but 99.9% of the time has nothing to do with mental illness. It has to do with the psychological garbage can. And to be honest with you, when I started in 92, there were suicides, but they were covered up by the departments.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
N-
yeah.
didn't want it out. And now it's becoming more and more prominent that it's happening. I know in Chicago, up in your part of the world, the numbers are just astronomical. And
Yeah,
I had
and
the honor.
I'll tell you about Chicago. The interesting thing about that is for probably when I was in the academy was I was in the academy in 1993, so a while ago. And at
Mhm,
the time there were no really reported suicides. And then shortly after we got into the later part of the 90s, all of a sudden they started happening. And we found out later on that a lot of it was the way that they were reporting it. Like you said, they cover them up. They're cleaning their gun. It was, they were found shot alone in their apartment, but nobody ever, there was no investigation. So it became
exactly.
that. And we have a program out here now called You Are Not Alone that deals
Hmm.
with peer counselors that
Uh-huh.
are law enforcement officers that have been peer trained. And
Yes.
that is something that has definitely helped some of the officers out here. The city of Chicago is its own world when it comes to
Yes.
that. The stress that those young men and women are under, they are understaffed. They are undersupported by the administration of the city of Chicago. They are supported by the administration of the police department, but they have to deal with the mayor and
Yes.
all the nonsense here. And of course, half the public hates them, and they've
Yes.
been vilified, especially after George Floyd. They've been vilified, so the stress for our officers is compounded.
Well, and now we've got the public and the media screaming about ICE agents wearing masks where it wasn't a problem for people to wear masks during COVID. Having been the family of federal law enforcement, I'm real sensitive to that stuff because we had our own children almost executed when they were 4 and 7 at a mall in Montgomery, Alabama, when they were with their dad during the holidays. And so the doxing of families and these agents and police off, and it's interesting because I actually had a high ranking person of one of the departments here in the valley, and he made the comment that he doesn't get to wear a mask when he was a police officer. And I said, yeah, but you made a decision to go into a line of work where uniforms are standard. These federal agents like ICE and people, he didn't go, mine with DEA, he didn't go into an industry where he was identified easily with a uniform. And so we have to, we have law enforcement is known for eating its own, which is pretty sad.
Yes.
And that's why the officers and people tell me I'm cut out to do what I do because I don't hold my tongue. I don't care if you're a chief, a sheriff. I'm going to speak my mind because, again, I've done this for 33 years. I was married to it. I've lived it. I've been around it. I've taught it at every level all over this country. And it's just really sad to me when we are looking at the wrong things. And, there are
Yeah.
resources out there, and you're absolutely right. There are tons of resources. The biggest problem is there's not a variety of resources.
Well,
We've
and that
always,
stigma too. The stigma
yes,
is another factor because I'll tell you, from an agency I had both levels. I was a line officer, and then I moved up the ranks and I became executive level. And I'll tell you the issues that you run into is number one is if you have an officer that comes forward and presents himself as having a traumatic event or having a problem, if you're not trained to deal with it the right way, your first port a thought process is the officer could hurt somebody or hurt themselves. We need
yes.
to take them off the street. We need to take their gun away from them. Well, that now becomes what if the officers needs to work overtime to pay for the things that they need for their kid. They've got a child that's sick and they're supplementing their health benefits that way, and all of a sudden you take that away from them and you've just compounded their stress level even more without knowing all the facts.
100%. And this is what we get really tired of it under the shield. We keep hearing from licensed mental health. And again, I have my master's in counseling, but I chose not to sit for licensure. I didn't want to be a mandated reporter. So, what we do it under the shield, we call it stress coaching, and we say it is education with a therapeutic value. Well, the license will, and I get it. I was trained in it and all that stuff, but we are never going to change the culture of law enforcement reaching out for help if we don't change the resources that are provided. Because if it's only going to be licensed mental health and in house peer support, the fear, right or wrong, is still there that they can take my badge and my gun. And that's where the stress coaching comes in, because what we do is done anonymously. And I'm amazed as I teach around the country that so many in law enforcement do not know the difference in confidentiality and anonymity. Confidentiality is a legal term, always with three exceptions. So when they hear 100% confidential, they believe nothing will be reported. When the reality is yes, there are three exceptions: homicidal, suicidal, child abuse, neglect, the handicap, or the elderly. The homeless man under the bridge is a mandated reporter for child abuse. We all are. But the homicidal and suicidal side of it, we look at very differently. No cop is going to come in here and tell me he's going to kill his lieutenant, and he means he's going to kill his lieutenant. He's coming in to vent, and we have a way of joking and making sure that no one is in danger. But we deal with suicidal law enforcement on a weekly basis, and it never gets reported. And the license world will come back and tell me that I am irresponsible letting an officer leave my office with their gun. And I go, well, then I guess I need to run a U-Haul, go to his house, back it up, put every gun in a gun safe because he's going to have a bunch of them. And while I'm there, I better get their knives, their spoons, their forks, their scissors, their medication, the keys to their car, and they can still go jump off an overpass in front of an 18.
Right,
I don't,
absolutely. And it's if somebody's going to hurt themselves, if they truly are destined to do it, it doesn't matter if you take away their primary source of doing it, they're going to do it. I had a
absolutely.
friend years ago. He presented as suicidal. I went and told his parents about it. His parents intervened. They took things out of the home. What did he do? He went and pulled into his garage and turned their car on and died that way. If you're gonna do it and the parents aren't gonna get him the help because of the stigma, and again, when we were teenagers, nobody got help for suicidal thoughts. It just didn't
Sure,
happen.
sure.
Yeah,
But
I
here's the
it's
point, Robert. If you come to my office and you're suicidal and I take your gun, and let's say that's the only one you have, that'd be a stretch, but let's just let's be a little delusional here and say that's all you have. Can you not go down and buy another one? Can you not borrow your buddies and say, "Hey, I'm thinking about buying one. Let me borrow it. I want to go to the range." You can
Mhm.
get your hands on a gun if you want one.
Yep. You can go
And
down to
it
the range and say, "Hey, I want to test fire this gun," and do it.
absolutely. Absolutely. It's not the gun, and that's where the focus has been. I know people that have testified before Congress that are supposedly the gurus of everything in suicide and law enforcement. And the philosophy is don't let officers take their guns home with them. And if they have to, make sure they know not to leave it sitting out where they might impulsively walk by and use it. And I go, it's the most insulting thing I've ever heard about a population that we should honor, respect, and not think that low of.
Yep, you're right, 100%. So let's dig into this a little bit deeper here now. Let's talk about since suicide prevention has been your focus. What role, if any, can any messaging be done to the general public? Can PIOs tell the public about what officers are going through? What way could we do that?
Well, I think the garbage can theory is probably the easiest way for people to understand really what happens, because there is no way to train everybody for what they're going to see and experience. And the other side to this too is I have done this 33 years. I cannot tell you how many officer involved shootings I have been a part of, and the officer shooting someone is not the issue. They're trained to do that. It's how the department responds. It's how the media portrays them. It's how the families portray them because we've not done any training on this. It's those things and the garbage can effect that really impact the officer. It has nothing to do with mental illness. It has everything to do with we teach them how to, when to, where to, why to, and then they do it. And all of a sudden, we've got them in front of people going, well, this is because you shot and killed somebody. And they're like, well, no, this is what I was trained to do. But sometimes I've seen it where it's they didn't get there fast enough and someone innocent was killed or hurt and they feel guilty about that because face it, your whole job description as a police officer is you're a problem solver.
Right.
And when
And
you don't
that's why
solve
we have been
everybody's problems.
Susan, that's why cops have all been dumped on of all the responsibility of everything that goes on in society. And then, of course, then the public complains and the politicians complain, oh, cops are responding to people in crisis. Who are you going to get to do that? It's been a disaster from what I'm understanding of those programs where they've had these crisis counselors respond and they're not effective. And then you end up
No,
calling the police anyways.
absolutely. I just, again, I laugh because I go, you're not going to send people with mental health training and backgrounds. I don't care how high their degrees go into a DV situation or something where someone is displaying some level of mental illness without a cop. I want to go watch. I'm going to bring my lawn chair and the cooler of beer and you and I are going to sit and we're going to critique the whole event and we're going to predict everything that's fixing to happen and it's not going to have a good outcome.
Right,
It's
right.
really very, very sad that we think that we can segment it out. And I laugh when I first started Under the Shield, when I teach basic academy classes now, I have to put a picture up in my PowerPoint of a payphone, a phone book, yellow pages, a pager, rabbit ears on a television, because these are things I talk about. And they look at me like, what is she talking about? But I said, when I first started, it was if you had a snake in a drain, if you couldn't look that up in the yellow pages, snake in a drain, and find a listing, you must call 911.
Right.
And now we have an added problem. And this is something else. Under the Shield seems to be the only ones talking about this body cams. I'm a huge fan of body cam. However, we have got to understand that body cams have now taken away one of the most effective coping mechanisms law enforcement has available to them, and that's dark humor. I've always told them do not use it in front of the media or the victim's family. But we have found studies that when doctors are known for this too, but when a police officer can use dark humor to get through an event, the body sends a message to the brain this has no power over me. So the things that used to fill up the psychological garbage can pre-body cam were usually things involving children because you never use sick or dark humor where children were concerned. Well, now because body cams are being reviewed periodically and we're
Hmm.
dinging officers for language and stuff, which amazes me that we can discipline an officer for language where there's no civilian complaint. I hate to tell them, but liability is huge there because if the civilian should find out the officer got in trouble for their language on their body cam, and that civilian gets a lawyer and comes to the department and says, oh, I have pain and suffering from the officer cussing at me, they're not going to be able to defend it because they've already
Right.
admitted guilt.
Right.
And how they haven't figured that out, I don't get. But we police our own more than we police the public.
I'm sure somewhere down the line, a lawyer said you should review body cameras to make sure that they're in compliance with policy. And then, of
Yes.
course, the supervisor sees the swear word. And let's face it, colorful language in law enforcement, there is a place sometimes. There really
Yes.
is.
Absolutely.
And unfortunately, you know, somebody's going to take the out of context video and say, well, that's what he does all the time. And it's a video of one and done. Or the
Sure.
gallows humor, like you said. I'll tell you, it's it's hard for people to understand this. Whenever I did community policing or citizen police academy training, I would talk about this because they would see officers standing around at a really bad crime scene telling a joke or laughing.
Hmm. Hmm.
That's because how else are they going to handle that job? Because they can't be stoic and like emotional because they won't be able to function.
Absolutely. I saw a sergeant one time on a ride along early in my career, and a driver had been decapitated. And he had a lot of young police officers standing around looking at this horrific scene, trying to figure out who's going to be the first one to throw up, and then it's going to have a chain reaction. And the sergeant literally walks up, no media, no family, nobody, walks up, looks at the car, at the body, and he says, "Young man, it really wasn't worth losing your head over." Now, what that did, now the public would lose their minds. But
Oh yeah.
what that did was that allowed those young officers to kind of giggle, back up, get their act together, and do their job. That was outstanding leadership, in my opinion.
Yep. No, there's I have some very traumatic events that have occurred in me in my career, and the things that I've seen, from decapitated young girls on backs of motorcycles to a person ran over by two 16-year-olds and dragged 1,200 feet and then driven over by another car to the point where there was, yeah. But either way, I
Everything
dealt with that.
inside was outside. Yes.
Exactly. You know it all. There
Yes.
you go. All right, so let me ask this question. You talk about resiliency training. You've mentioned that. What does that look like day to day level for the officer that might be in crisis?
Okay. Well, and what we try to do with them and in our training classes is we believe the brain controls the body, but how the body feels impacts what the brain thinks. I'm one of the only mental health clinicians who spent 5 weeks with the NYPD post 9/11 in the pit and at the landfill. And we worked some with FDNY. They also would come over. But the reality is what I realized in that is when people are healthier going into critical incidents, they're going to be healthier coming out the back end. And so what we do is we try to prepare them based on sleep, vitamins and minerals, and things that get the body in better shape, because when the brain controls the body, how the body feels impacts what the brain thinks. And my son, who's a Marine, laughs and says, "Who knew that the Snickers commercials would support my mother's philosophy?" But it's true. When you're angry, you overreact to things. And the same thing with sleep. So our whole philosophy is if we could get departments to understand that training ahead of time, which is why AZ Post has now adopted the garbage can theory as something that has to be taught in all basic academy classes, because we educate them about it, what it looks like that they have one, and then we talk about the physiological reactions regarding they're not eating healthy. How can't none of us are eating healthy, but cops, especially on graves, there's not a lot of options out there that are really healthy for them. But we talk about the need and the necessity to supplement with certain vitamins, certain minerals in order to get good, healthy, quality sleep, not quantity sleep. This is what builds, not just exposing them to a lot of things. That, don't get me wrong, that does help, but we still have to make sure the body is in the right place and isn't depleted in order for them not to overreact to things.
Right. Susan, from my experience in dealing with stress and so on, there things like taking magnesium to help you sleep and ashwagandha to help you relax it for anxiety are things that I've learned that works for me.
Yes.
And I know law enforcement doesn't do this enough, but this is about healthy lifestyle approach, right? It's kind of like
Yes.
the whole life way of dealing with it, because it's eventually going to help reduce health issues that they'll run into that will increase health costs for the agency, right?
Absolutely. I can tell you in 99% of the cases that we see across this country, and we have two stress coaches in Canada, suicide comes down to sleep deprivation. We can turn that around in 24 to 48 hours if they'll do the things that we recommend. The vitamin, we always start people on a healthy D3 with an MK7 because it's the only way your body can process it, a really healthy vitamin B complex with a methylcobalamin B12 in it, not cyanocobalamin, and then two forms of magnesium. One crosses the blood brain barrier that calms the brain, because face it, all of you have ADD or ADHD, and you get in, which means you're of higher IQ now. Let me be clear about that. But it means you get in the bed and in the dark, your brain engages. And the funny part is when I have spouses come in with the law enforcement officer and I go, I'll ask the cop, So how are you sleeping? And he looks at his Fitbit and I go, I don't give a damn what your Fitbit says. I want to know how you're sleeping. And he'll go, I'm sleeping fine. And I look at the wife and I go, does he twitch in his sleep? And she goes, oh my God, all the time. Well, that magnesium L-threonate that crosses the blood-brain barrier calms the brain and allows the brain then to get better quality REM and delta sleep. And the twitching stops. Then they can either usually recommend a citrate, magnesium citrate or glycinate and or Epsom salt bath, whichever. Oxide, never. Some of the others, we don't see the results, but those things then relax the muscles. So now we've got muscular relaxation, we've got the brain calming down, and even the special forces guys that I have worked with, Navy SEALs, Marine recons that are now MARSOC, and I still will call them recons because I think it's a cooler name, but that's just my opinion. They will say that this stuff is life changing. And when we can
So
get people sleeping better, everything's better.
absolutely. I'll tell you the interesting thing. So the fire department, like after an incident,
Hmm.
even if it's still going on, the fire department has policy where they just keep bringing resources in, and then they take personnel out and they put them into rehab. So if it's a really hot environment, like right now in Illinois, we're having extreme heat, and if there was a bad fire and they were there for a prolonged period of time, they actually bring out a tent, and it's a cooling tent. It's got air conditioning unit in there. They get the firearm. They get them out of their gear. They get them cool. They get them hydrated. They get them to rest. We
Sure.
don't do that in law enforcement. You go
Heavens
out there
no.
and you go from call to call to call.
Well, not to mention, if you are in a shooting, we need to be getting these people off scene as quickly as possible, meeting basic needs. I'm not saying necessarily go home, although that would be my choice, but get them off scene where the adrenaline is coming out of their system. Because it's shocking to me at the number of people, even in firearms training, that don't realize when adrenaline kicks into your system, the very first thing to stop is cognitive function. We don't need no stinking thinking, we need muscles. We need things to hit them harder, chase them faster, whatever. So when you can get adrenaline back down out of their system, you're going to wind up getting more accurate statements. And I'm still a believer in 3 sleep patterns before they give a statement, not 72 hours, because many don't understand. This is something else. Fire out here, I don't know where else, is starting to hear us. We're telling them do things like put punching bags in the firehouse so that when they come back off of a call that wakes them up in the middle of the night, adrenaline shoots up, they go out on the call. It turns out really not to be anything that they need that adrenaline for. That adrenaline, if you don't dump this stuff, then it stores in the muscles. And I'm simplifying this greatly. And when you go to sleep, it feeds into the bloodstream, races to your brain, and raises your level of sleep. We have clients all the time who go, I slept 12 hours, but I felt like I fought myself all night. Well, then we recommend run sprints and or punch and kick a bag like you're fighting for your life. Because now what are we doing? We're mimicking fight or flight. And what happens after you do that? You get the crash, the adrenaline is out of the system. Now you can go to bed and get good sleep. And these are the things we're trying to get departments to understand that we do that's the preventative side of the house, not always the reactive. And that's
Hmm.
our big frustration. Too many times, intervention is being checked off as prevention, and they are
Yes,
not the same
absolutely.
thing. They are not
Absolutely.
the same thing. And I spoke up in Chicago at Chicago PD back in early part of the year, and I had about 250 in the class and asked the question, how many had had true law enforcement suicide prevention? You wouldn't believe the hands that went up. And I said, hang on, leave your hands up. Think about the training. If it was awareness training, put your hands down. Bunch of hands went down. I said, for the rest of you, was it prevention or intervention? If it's intervention, put your hands down. Every hand went down. And at the end of the class, I got a standing ovation. I had someone come up and tell me the reason was because it's the first true prevention training they had actually had. And I thought, that's crazy to me that they don't come out of a training and go, that wasn't prevention, it was intervention. But
Because
that's
that's what
how
they've
it's
been
sold.
told. That's the
Yes.
way it's sold. It's sold that way. Yeah, absolutely.
And and to me,
Listen, go ahead.
an officer's job is already on the line. We want to keep it from getting to where we have to intervene.
Right, right. And you bring up officer involved shootings and you want to get them away from the scene as quickly as possible. And our biggest issue that law enforcement has to deal with is number one is they've got to get what occurred,
Hmm.
because then they've got to go talk to the media. They got to tell
Hmm.
the media what occurred. If we're silent, we don't have an answer for them in a relatively quick manner. It's automatically a cover up.
And that's sad, but you're right. It's true.
And as a result, you have to get a statement from the officer, at least an initial, which you still have to do. You have to have the initial
Yes.
statement. But I am a big believer that at that point, let them go, let them get into rehab, let them go get checked out by a doctor. And we did tell our officers that as a policy, you're going to the hospital no matter what, just to
Yep.
make sure that your heart is okay, that you're not hurt. Because once
Yes.
you get them in a hospital, you really can't do a whole lot with them at that point.
That's right.
They're protected in a way. So
Well,
that did work for.
yeah. I tell them, go in, grab an ER doctor or nurse and go, I've been in a critical incident. Give me an aspirin, give me something. Because anything they give them at that point, anything said after that is absolutely useless and cannot be utilized.
Yep, absolutely.
And you're right, they are
Susan, let's
protected.
yeah, Susan, let's talk about your program because we haven't really said about this. So explain to me how it works, and then how do agencies, how can they get it if they don't have it or they're interested in getting it?
Sure. The first two things we really encourage is the training, because the training is kind of what we do in our stress coaching with individuals if they've never been through a class. So we encourage departments to do the training where spouses are included, and we'll do that on a Saturday even. It's an 8-hour training, and it's teaching spouses about being a part of a lifestyle so that they can help head things off in that garbage can early on.
So
And
important.
yes, and as first line of defense, they have to know what to look for and who they can call. Then the second one is a supervisor training that for law enforcement, we call it why good cops make quote bad close quote decisions. And it's always interesting to hear departments. I was at a county not too long ago and I said something in this training, and one of the higher ups said a name, and everybody kind of started laughing. And I go, okay, tell me about that person. Oh, they're always making stupid decisions and stuff. And I said, okay, time out. Were they that way when you hired them? And all of a sudden you can see light bulbs going off like, oh, I stepped in a hole I probably shouldn't have stepped in. And they go, no, they weren't. And I go, oh, so you made them that way. And now they're really trying to backpedal. And I go, what it's telling you is that you're not seeing the early warning signs to add additional training, add additional resources, support, something. Because how many times in your career did an officer get in trouble, Robert? And everybody goes, oh, yeah, man, saw that coming. And you go, what'd you do about it? Oh, well, and I go, so this supervisor training is so important because we're teaching the early warning signs for them
Hmm.
to see of their people that they're supervising. We want it caught at episodic levels before it hits chronic, where you have to discipline or terminate. And I tell you, Haida out here will tell you that is the number one most requested training that they have from us. And we actually had one a couple of years ago. They do an evaluation at the end, no names on it or anything. And someone in narcotics, the supervisor, actually wrote the timing on this training was spot on because this individual was planning to kill themselves, but now knew why and had the tools now to go on and then also be able to help their people.
Wow.
That was worth $1 million to me. There's not a paycheck you could write big enough for
Nope.
what that
Nope. Nope.
person
Nope.
wrote.
Nope. That's
And
outstanding.
here's the thing, we have a hard time selling this training. But what happens in the training is they get to know us. And then when we talk about the stress coaching, they're more likely to reach out to us because they've met us. I'm not just a name on a piece of paper
Hmm.
like everybody in EAP and peer support and all that stuff. And they're like, that woman's not going to take any crap off anybody because I don't. And right is right. And I'm going to stand up for what's right. And having been a litigation paralegal, if things aren't written down, nobody can get it. Good luck getting it out of this old head. I can't even find it half the time. But that's what it's about. And it's not about putting officers out on the street who are going to endanger anybody or whatever. We know how to fix it. But again, the majority of it can be fixed with this prevention training ahead of time.
So, all right. So you're telling us you're trying to get this out to the departments. Nobody's buying this. Are you going to the International Association of Chiefs of Police and trying to get into one of the conferences to talk about it?
I have tried for years to the point I quit because they get caught up in wanting the licensed mental health world.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the licensed mental health world is very necessary. We are not trying to eliminate licensed mental health. We have somebody we refer people to who is amazing. Everybody adores him. And we use it though for FMLA, workman's comp, or medical retirements, or when I feel like they need that extra little something. We don't pass them off. We work in conjunction with him. But the license world wants everything done based by what the book knowledge is. And that's something I learned. I was taught in my master's program how to identify a person's issues, but not really how to fix them. And again, law enforcement, look, y'all are all crazy, but you're not mentally ill. There is a difference. And I go, that makes me even crazier because I was married to it. Plus, I've been doing this for 33 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I get it. And it's funny when I tell a cop that, whether he's SWAT, whether he's narcotics, whether he's federal, whatever, one of the first things I tell them is when they sit down is, you are crazy, but you are not mentally ill. There is a difference. And they will tell you that's why they keep coming back to me because I get it. And departments, for some reason, are caught up in the liability side. We have professional liability insurance. We're not a loose cannon out here. But here's the interesting part. 4 years ago, we contracted, they sought us out. It's called the Arizona Municipal Risk Retention Pool. They are the professional liability insurance carrier for 79 of the 91 cities and towns in Arizona. And I thought it was some cop yanking my chain. They called me and they said, we've been looking for an anonymous mental wellness provider in the state of Arizona around the country. They've been looking for 3 years. And I'm thinking, professional liability insurance doesn't want notes and records. Sure. Who do you work for? And then they said, and the reason we're looking for that is because our licensed mental health have developed PTSD from talking to our police and fire. Now I know it's some cop yanking my chain. And so I buy into it and I go, sure, absolutely. Well, they wind up on my couch the next day. We're in our 4th year of a contract. And what they are willing to come out and say is they haven't had a single excessive use of force claim since contracting with us in 79 cities and towns.
Wow.
And it's because we're getting things done ahead of time on the front end through the
Right.
training,
The
through
real
the stress
prevention.
coaching.
The real prevention. Yeah.
And it's important for people to understand we're not getting rid of the license world, but the IACP is only interested in having psychologists and licensed mental health speak at their conferences. We're finding this with all of the major national conferences. They just want the licensed world in there. Yeah.
Right, and completely understandable. But there is a place for your program and other programs like it, obviously on the prevention side, because everything liability wise for agencies is about intervention, right? That's what they're looking for.
Yes.
They want to be able to tell officers what to do when they see somebody in crisis and
Yes.
be able to intervene in it, which is great, but it doesn't do the holistic end of it of helping the officers prior. So, how, if agencies are interested in contacting you, how do they do that?
Well, several ways. They can call me on my cell phone or text me at 334-324-3570. They can go to our website, undertheshield.org. They can email us at info@undertheshield.org. And actually, the email may be .com still. Either one, info@undertheshield.com, and we will get all the information to them. This training has been post-certified in most states. And again, it is 8 hours of training on both of these. It's going to save marriages. It's going to save careers. It's going to save lives because right now retention is huge. We've got to keep the ones that have the experience. You want to talk about liability. let a 5, 10 year officer leave and replace him with a straight out of the academy, your liabilities with
Hmm.
that new kid coming out of the academy.
Yeah. Yep.
And
Absolutely.
that's the key here. That's our whole thing, is trying to make sure people are healthier going in, staying in, so that then they retain and they stay through retirement.
Absolutely. Susan, let's do this. Let's wrap this up with some points here. Final thoughts. What key points would you like listeners to take from today's interview?
There is help that is different than everything else being provided. The anonymity is the most important part of it when they reach out to us. And again, you have my cell number. They can text me, call me directly. And there is training out there on the prevention side that helps families, helps officers, and ultimately is going to help the department and the community.
Excellent. And as we wrap this up, is there a piece of wisdom or a motto that you live by?
Wow. Yes. At Under the Shield, we believe when you find purpose in your pain, there's healing. Otherwise, it's just pain. And that's what I live by. It's what gets me through tough times, is being able to help other people with my own experiences.
Excellent. And let's say this again. How can people best reach you if they want to connect or learn more about Under the
Uh,
Shield?
our, our website is undertheshield.org. They can reach out on my cell phone, 334-324-3570. Email us, info@undertheshield.com.
Excellent. Susan, thank you very much for being on the show.
Thank you. It was an honor. God bless you. God bless your audience. And God bless the United States of America.